Senator Roberts, you have the call.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for appearing again today. How many permanent visas are currently issued for residency in Australia, and how many temporary visas are currently issued for residency in Australia?
I'll just get the relevant officers to come to the table, Senator.
Thank you.
Mr. Kilner, do you want the question again?
Yes, I just want to give my name first, thank you. Damien Kilner, First Assistant Secretary, Immigration Programs Division. Could I please just get the question again?
Sure.
Please?
How many permanent visas are currently issued for residency in Australia, and how many temporary visas are currently issued for residency in Australia?
So, Senator, for the migration program, the current numbers for this program year will be 185,000 migrant visas. That's the program numbers for this year.
That's permanent?
They would be permanent visas, yes.
180,000.
185,000, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator, for temporary visas, there are a range of different visas that we have. For student visas, most of these are demand-driven, Senator. So the programs, so the key programs for student visas, I'll give you a figure for last program year as an example, and I can give you a figure for visas that have been granted so far this year. So for last program year, there were 580,193 visas granted. So far, this is to 30 September, Senator. There were 99,868 visas granted so far this year from 1 July to 30 September. Sorry, that was lodged. So granted, it was 86,473. The numbers of granted for last program year was 376,731 for students. For temporary residents, Senator, the numbers granted were last financial year 315,632. So far this program year, there's up till 30 September, there's been 64,820 visas granted. And I'll also go to visitor visas.
What was that category?
That was temporary residence visas.
Okay. The previous one was temporary visas students.
So there's a different category. So that was student. The next one was temporary visas that I gave you.
Yep.
For visitor visas, Senator, the numbers granted for last program year was 4,713,442. For this year to date, up to 30 September, it's been 1,203,891.
What was that figure again?
Sorry, Senator. 1,203,891. And for working holiday maker visas, Senator, last program year there were 234,556, and so far this year there has been 95,371.
Thank you. Now that the war, I'm going to another tack now. Now that the war in the Middle East has progressed to responding to attacks by Hezbollah, a terrorist group from Lebanon, how many migrants from Lebanon have been received into Australia in the last year?
I'll have to take that figure on notice. I think I'll just check if my colleagues have a figure. We may need to take that one on notice.
Senator, I provided some evidence earlier on the number of visas we've granted to Lebanese citizens over the past 12 months. Your question was specifically about permanent visas, as I understand it. I don't have that breakdown, but I do have that figure which I could repeat. So since the 7th of October 2023, 8,333 migration and temporary visa applications have been granted to Lebanese
But the
nationals.
migrants you can get on notice? The permanents?
I can get the breakdown on notice, yes, Senator.
Thank you. How many applications for visas over the last year from Lebanon have been received to come into Australia?
So the figure for applications, and again this date is since the 7th of October 2023 to the 15th of October 2024, is 15,525 migration and temporary visa applications lodged.
What is the vetting process for these visa applications?
Senator, all applications are assessed against criteria for grant of a visa, which covers character, security, health and a range of other criteria depending on the visa that's granted. We have to be satisfied of someone's identity and there's a range of processes that sit behind all of those assessments.
So can you lead me through the process? A person makes an application, then what happens to that application?
So typically, Senator, the application's lodged online, which is how over 99% of our applications are received.
Does that go to a consulate or something in Lebanon, or does it come here?
It goes to one of our processing offices around the world. Some of them come here, some go to our embassy in Beirut, some go to other locations. When the application is lodged, there's a series of risk alerts in place that identify concerns or characteristics to look for around fraud and non-genuineness and other concerns. Just to give you a sense of that process, there's well over 1 million alerts in place that relate to identities and documents of concern. That's on something called the Migration Alert List.
So excuse me just for a minute then, it's probably appropriate to ask this now. So you work with intelligence agencies, Home Affairs, cybercrime?
Yes, Senator, we get information from a range of sources, including security agencies, other agencies within the Commonwealth, law enforcement agencies, partners around the world, a whole range of information. In addition to those alerts that relate to identities and documents of concern, there's another 3.4 million entity details which are matched against visa applications, and that might be, and I don't want to go into too much detail here, Senator, in a way that sets out exactly what the process is, because that provides an opportunity to game the process. Yeah. But entity matches are any piece of information that we've collected that might be able to be matched against an application. There's also 1,000 rules-based alerts, which is an alert that comes up to the decision maker to take a particular action on a particular application, depending on the characteristics of that application. And we also have 43 predictive models that again give a decision maker an indication of the risk associated with a particular application. That's not all that happens, but that's the starting point. Then there's an assessment of the application, all of the claims that are made, documents that are submitted in support of the application, and that's all considered against the criteria for the grant of the visa. If all the criteria are met, then the application is granted.
2 questions around that, please. What's the estimated time taken to process visa applications? And I'm guessing there's a wide range of times here. And secondly, would it be better to process these visa applications prior to these persons being allowed to enter Australia?
All the applications are processed when they're lodged offshore, are processed prior to them entering. In fact, they can only enter if they are granted a visa, so they've gone through that process and met all the criteria for visa grant.
Does that apply to refugees?
That applies to all visa applicants, including refugees. Sorry, Senator, can you repeat the first part of your question?
What is the estimated time taken to process these visa applications?
At the moment in Lebanon, we're looking at about a couple of weeks. Again, as you said, there's a range of processing times, but that's roughly what we're looking at.
So 2 questions from that. Is that a fast track for people from Lebanon? And I've got nothing from people from Lebanon. I buy my lunch from them every day, and they're wonderful people, some of them.
What we're doing in respect of Lebanon is we're supporting circumstances where Australian citizens are seeking to leave, and a close family member might be someone who needs a visa. So it might be their partner, it could be children, it could be a parent. And in that circumstance, we're prioritising that assessment, but we're not. Everyone still has to meet all the criteria for the grant of a visa, and that process is at the moment taking a couple of weeks.
Is there any consideration being given to staying applications for visas from people from Palestine and Lebanon until hostilities cease?
Senator, across many years we've seen in all sorts of circumstances situations where there's challenges in various countries. The officers who make the decisions, the delegated decision makers, their role is to consider applications against the criteria and make an assessment of whether or not someone can be granted a visa.
So my interpretation of what you just said, and thank you for that, is that the criteria are not compromised.
No, the criteria are not compromised.
So that's the most important thing, criteria. But if there's a human rights crisis, as there is right now in Palestine and Lebanon, you may try and put more resources in it. How would you shorten up the period?
It's an exercise in prioritisation. So, for example, triaging applications when they come in and where there's additional information required, making sure that's actioned promptly. People get information about what they need to provide to satisfy the criteria. It's also about making sure we've got contingency, particularly in Lebanon at the moment, to be able to handle unexpected circumstances. For example, we have a capacity to collect biometrics through a mobile collection facility. We also have some additional officers in country who are supporting the staff that are already there, who've been going through a long period in Lebanon where it's been in a crisis situation, and so providing some additional staff to support them is part of what we're doing as well.
So would those staff already be in Lebanon? I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
And they're redirected to that, retasked?
So we've got 2 posted officers and 10 locally engaged staff in Beirut, and they've been doing a tremendous job in difficult circumstances. What we've done is have some additional people go in to provide some support and capacity for them to rest and recuperate and actually have a break as well.
Are they from Australia or from somewhere else in Europe and Middle East?
So there's a few from Australia and some have been cross-posted from other posts overseas.
How do you make sure that they can understand the cultural signs in Lebanon?
There's a series of training and assessments that we do before we post people. And they are trained on cultural awareness training, but in particular for this particular situation, they're also trained in working in high-threat environments. They've also been assessed in terms of resilience because sometimes it is a very difficult circumstance, and officers are selected with those particular qualities.
So those cultural training, that's to be familiar with the local culture so that people understand the flags, not DEI cultural awareness.
It's a broader training that people go through on their overseas preparation course around cultural awareness. It's not specific to each country. When they do go into country, though, they are briefed by the local post, particularly around the security circumstances.
Thank you. Switching to Palestine, how many visa applications from Palestinians have been finalised over the last year with full risk vetting completed?
Senator, I provided some evidence earlier. I'm happy to repeat that. So, Senator, there's 3,041 visas have been granted to holders of Palestinian travel documents, and I'll just get that number for you. 7,252 visas have been refused, visitor visas have been refused. In addition, another 45 migration and temporary visas have been refused, 8 protection visas have been refused, and less than 5 humanitarian visas have been refused.
So out of about 10,300, 3,041 have been approved. Okay.
Yep.
Is it true, as the media stated, that some of those visa applications were processed in around 1 hour?
Senator, I do have some processing time information that could perhaps provide some detail there. So since October 2023 and going through to the end of September 2024, the median processing time for all visas finalised from holders of Palestinian travel documents is 116 days. And the average processing time in that same period is 107 days.
Medians and average, and I'm not accusing you of hiding anything, can hide many, many things. Were some of the visas approved in less than an hour or around an hour?
Senator, we're not able to report on that level of detail. I would be very surprised if that was the case, but I can't provide a report to...
Are you familiar with the claims made in the mainstream media, the mouthpiece media?
I am familiar, Senator, and in fact some of it may have related indirectly to evidence I provided previously before this committee, in which I was making a reference to globally visitor visas are processed in 1 day. But in making that reference, I mean all visa applications from all nationalities around the world. The median processing time is a day, and that is on our website, that median processing time.
That's from application being received to the visa being granted as a day?
That's the median processing time for visitor visa for all nationalities around the world. Doesn't mean it's the median processing time for holders of Palestinian travel documents. I just provided that figure at 116 days.
Senator Roberts, I'm just going to draw your attention to the time. I'll have to share the call in a few minutes, if you can.
Okay, thank you. One last question then. How many of those Palestinian visa applications are still outstanding?
Senator, I gave some evidence earlier. I think the figures...
And how many of them are connected with Hamas or Hezbollah sympathisers?
So for the visa applications outstanding outside Australia, as at the end of 30th September, that figure's 200. And I can't provide a response to the second part of your question because the fact they're outstanding means they haven't yet been assessed.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Roberts.